by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Avery Quinn was experiencing what could only be described as a complete professional meltdown. First, she'd accidentally launched her entire iced latte across her laptop keyboard during the quarterly presentation. Then, she discovered their biggest client was withdrawing from their partnership, and now, sitting across from CEO Madeline Voss in her glass-walled corner office, she was hearing those career-ending words every employee dreads. Avery, I need to be brutally honest with you. Your department's results have been disappointing for 3 consecutive quarters. Avery's mouth went completely dry. At 29, as senior marketing manager for one of the West Coast's most innovative tech companies, she knew her position was precarious. She just hadn't anticipated the axe falling today. However, Madeline continued, adjusting her trendy tortoiseshell glasses, I believe in second chances, particularly for employees who show genuine growth in their personal lives. Growth in my personal life? Avery's forehead wrinkled in confusion. Precisely. You see, Avery, your professional abilities are adequate, but there's a missing element. Emotional intelligence. Commitment. Our elite clients want to partner with agencies staffed by individuals who demonstrate real understanding of relationships and stability. Avery felt her stomach drop like a stone. She knew exactly where this conversation was headed. That's why I'm assigning you to lead our most prestigious project this quarter, the complete digital transformation campaign for Crestwood Enterprises. They're exceptionally conservative. Prioritize family values above everything else. They only engage with firms whose senior staff reflect those same commitments. I completely align with those values. Avery lied smoothly. Of course you do, darling, which is why I was absolutely delighted when I heard about your engagement. The entire universe screeched to a halt. My, what exactly? Madeline practically glowed with excitement. Don't be modest. Your assistant Lauren mentioned that stunning ring you've been wearing. How wonderfully romantic. And the timing is absolutely perfect for your career advancement. Avery stared at her left hand in pure panic. Her grandmother's vintage cocktail ring, which she'd moved to her ring finger yesterday because her middle finger had a paper cut. Lauren, barely 22 and clearly a hopeless romantic, had completely misinterpreted the jewelry switch. But apparently the news had already circulated through the entire office. Madeline, I really should explain that I'm not actually, not another word. I want it to be a complete surprise at Friday's presentation dinner. The Crestwood family absolutely loves meeting our executives' partners. They'll be absolutely charmed. Avery felt like she was trapped in a spinning carnival ride. Friday. Today was Tuesday. She had exactly 72 hours to either materialize a fiancé or watch her career explode into smithereens. And Avery, Madeline leaned forward with a knowing smile. Between you and me, your timing is absolutely brilliant. Unmarried executives rarely break through to the C-suite level here. But with this wonderful development in your personal life, I can see incredible opportunities ahead. When Avery finally escaped the office, her legs felt like they'd been replaced with jelly. She was staring down 3 equally terrifying possibilities. Admit to the accidental lie and face immediate unemployment. Disappear to a remote island nation. Or somehow recruit a willing accomplice for the most elaborate fake engagement scheme in corporate history. The third option seemed slightly less apocalyptic. Standing in the elevator, she was already mentally reviewing her limited dating prospects when the doors opened on the 12th floor. In stepped the most absolutely gorgeous man she'd ever laid eyes on, tall with an athletic build, perfectly styled chocolate brown hair, and wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than her car payment. He was deep in what sounded like an increasingly exasperated phone conversation, his voice carrying that confident, authoritative tone that made her stomach flutter. Unexpectedly, no, Mom, for the 15th time this week, I will not be attending the charity auction, especially not if you've orchestrated another surprise encounter with some supposedly ideal daughter from your book club. Avery had to press her lips together to avoid laughing out loud. Clearly, she wasn't alone in dealing with impossible family interference, because I need to concentrate entirely on the quarterly expansion. No, I haven't become some cold, calculating robot. Yes, I'll eventually find someone, but through my own choices, not your elaborate matchmaking conspiracies. The elevator reached the ground floor, and he walked out briskly. Still obviously frustrated by his mother's romantic meddling, Avery stood frozen, watching him stride through the busy lobby. Then, in what was either a moment of pure brilliance or absolute insanity, she had an idea that changed everything. She sprinted after him at maximum speed. "Excuse me, wait up." He turned around, immediately ending his phone call. At close range, his eyes were even more captivating, a warm hazel that seemed to see right through her carefully maintained professional facade. Yes? Avery took the deepest breath of her entire life and blurted out what had to be the strangest proposition in modern dating. Would you consider being my fake fiancé? The silence that followed was so absolute, she could hear her own pulse pounding in her temples. I'm sorry, did you just ask what I think you asked? He blinked, repeatedly, as if checking whether he'd experienced some kind of auditory malfunction, not permanently, just for pretend. For one night, this Friday, absolutely crucial business dinner. My entire career is hanging by a thread, and I accidentally overheard your phone conversation and thought maybe you could also use someone to get your family off your back about dating. She was talking at warp speed, words colliding into each other in a frantic rush. He held up one hand in a calming gesture. Slow down there. Avery obediently filled her lungs with oxygen. Okay, try that again, but at normal human speaking pace. I desperately need a fake fiancé for Friday evening. You clearly need your family to stop interfering in your romantic life. We could solve both problems at the same time. He examined her face carefully for several long seconds, and she detected what might have been curiosity mixed with amusement in his expression. You're completely serious about this? Absolutely. Look, I know it sounds totally crazy, but it's just one single evening. You pretend to adore me. I pretend to adore you. We convince some very powerful people that we're the perfect couple, and then we go back to being complete strangers. And what exactly would convince me to participate in this elaborate performance? Avery's brain shifted into overdrive. Because you seem like a genuinely good person, and good people help other good people when they're facing complete disasters. He actually chuckled a deep, warm sound that created some very interesting reactions in her nervous system. That's your sales pitch? I'm just warming up. Avery shifted into her confident boardroom posture. You help me navigate this crisis. I help you handle your family drama. At your next family event, you can mention your serious girlfriend. Maybe show some pictures. And suddenly everyone stops trying to arrange your social life. Pictures of us. We could take some right now, looking happy and completely smitten with each other. He shook his head with what looked like genuine respect. You've really thought through every angle of this plan. Strategic planning is what I do best. And what should I call you? Architect of impossible schemes. Avery Quinn. And you? His entire demeanor changed instantly. The amused smile disappeared completely, replaced by what could only be described as shock, transitioning into horror. Lucas Crestwood. Avery felt her world collapse for the second time in a single day. Crestwood, as in Crestwood Enterprises. The client I need to impress on Friday, founder's son and current president, which makes me your direct supervisor for this entire project. Avery's knees almost gave out completely. So I just asked the son of my most critical client to pretend to be my fiancé so I could impress his own father. That's a pretty accurate summary. They stared at each other in complete silence for what felt like several minutes. Then Lucas did something she never could have predicted. He started laughing, not polite professional laughter, but complete, uncontrolled, bend-over-at-the-waist laughter. I'm sorry, he gasped between laughing fits, but this is hands down the most ridiculous situation I've ever been part of. And considering my mother once hired a dating coach to analyze my conversation skills, that's really saying something. Avery couldn't decide whether to laugh along or find the nearest exit and never return. So that's definitely a no? Then Lucas finally composed himself, wiping tears from his eyes and looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Actually, he said slowly, this might be exactly the solution I've been looking for. 2 hours later, Avery found herself sitting in a trendy coffee shop 3 blocks from the office, still processing how her life had transformed into a romantic comedy disaster. Lucas arrived precisely at 3 p.m., having traded his corporate suit for dark jeans and a crisp white button-down that somehow made him look even more attractive. He slid into the seat across from her and placed a folded piece of paper on the small round table. I drafted some ground rules. Ground rules? If we're actually doing this ridiculous thing, it needs to be executed flawlessly. He pushed the paper toward her. Read it. Avery unfolded the document and nearly choked on her cappuccino. Fake engagement contract. Lucas and Avery. Rule 1. Maximum duration 2 weeks until Crestwood project completion. Rule 2. No physical contact beyond what's necessary for public appearances. Rule 3. Consistent backstory about how we met and fell in love. Rule 4. Zero emotional attachment under any circumstances. Rule 5. Complete discretion. Nobody can discover this is fake. Rule 6. Clean breakup with no drama when this ends. You're absolutely insane. Avery looked up from the paper. Who creates contracts for fake relationships? Business executives who prefer to avoid unnecessary complications. Are you also a lawyer or something? An MBA with a law degree. But I work exclusively on the business side. Lucas pulled out an expensive-looking pen. Anything you'd like to add? Avery reread the rules. They were logical, professional, and completely boring, exactly the type of things she would have written herself. Rule 7, she said, taking the pen. If either person wants to bail, 24 hours notice required. Fair enough. He nodded approvingly. Rule 8. No lies about professional matters, only about the relationship. Rule 9. We split all expenses, 5,050. I don't want to owe you anything. Rule 10. If anyone discovers the truth, we both take equal responsibility. Avery finished writing and handed the pen back. This feels incredibly formal for something so ridiculous. Ridicule situation require extra structure. Lucas reviewed their additions. Now we need our backstory. How did we supposedly meet? Well, Avery tapped her fingers on the table. We can't say work because that would be weird with your family business. Maybe we met at a coffee shop? Too generic. What about a cooking class? Avery laughed. I once burned water trying to make instant noodles. Seriously. I'm completely hopeless in the kitchen. My smoke detector doubles as a dinner timer. Lucas grinned. That's actually perfect. I love cooking. I could be teaching you. Wait, you actually cook? I went to culinary school for a year before business school. My mom still thinks it was a phase. Avery stared at him. You're full of surprises. So, we met at a farmer's market. You were completely lost trying to pick vegetables. I offered to help, and sparks flew over organic tomatoes. That's actually pretty good. Avery made notes on a napkin. How long have we been together? 6 months. Long enough to be serious. Not so long that people wonder why they haven't heard about me. And why are we getting married? Lucas paused, his pen hovering over the paper. Because we realized we couldn't imagine her life without each other. Something in his tone made Avery look up sharply. For just a moment, his expression was almost wistful before he snapped back to business mode. Right. Classic answer. She cleared her throat. What about the proposal? People always ask about that. Rooftop of my apartment building, sunset. City lights, very romantic. Did you get down on one knee? Obviously. I'm not a barbarian. Avery found herself smiling despite the absurdity of planning a fake proposal. What about the ring? Lucas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Actually, I have that covered. Avery's eyes widened. You bought a ring in 2 hours? My grandmother's engagement ring. She left it to me specifically for when I got engaged. He opened the box, revealing a stunning vintage diamond solitaire. I figured we might as well make this convincing. Avery stared at the ring. It was absolutely beautiful, with intricate details that spoke of genuine craftsmanship and family history. I can't wear your grandmother's ring. That's too real. It's perfect for our purposes. Family heirloom suggests serious commitment. But what if something happens to it? Avery, it's been sitting in my safe deposit box for 5 years. At least this way it serves a purpose. Before she could protest further, he took her left hand and slipped the ring onto her finger. The moment his skin touched hers, something electric shot up her arm. From his sharp intake of breath, she suspected he felt it too. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. How did you know my size? Lucky guess. His voice sounded slightly strained. They both stared at her hand for a moment. The ring caught the light beautifully, and for a few seconds Avery could almost imagine this was real. Okay, she said, forcing herself back to reality. We should probably practice. Practice what? Acting like a couple. We need to be convincing on Friday. Lucas nodded slowly. You're right. What do couples do? Well, they talk to each other like they're fond of each other as opposed to how we're talking now. We're talking like we're negotiating a business contract. We are negotiating a business contract. Avery laughed. Try again. Pretend you actually like me. Lucas leaned back in his chair, studying her face. When he spoke again, his voice was warmer, softer. How was your day, sweetheart? The endearment sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. Better now that I'm here with you. That sounded almost natural. Years of client presentations. I can fake enthusiasm for anything. Ouch. Lucas clutched his chest dramatically. You wound me. See? You're getting the hang of it. Avery grinned. Now try holding my hand. He hesitated. Rule 2 says no unnecessary physical contact. This is necessary for practice. Slowly, Lucas reached across the table and took her hand in his. His fingers were warm and slightly calloused, probably from all that cooking. He mentioned, How's this? He asked. Good. Natural. She was proud of how steady her voice sounded. Maybe try the thumb thing. The thumb thing? You know when people rub their thumb across the other person's hand, couples do it all the time. Lucas began moving his thumb in slow circles across her knuckles. Avery's brain immediately short-circuited. Like that? He asked, completely unaware that he was melting her from the inside out. Perfect, she managed. Very coupley. They sat like that for several moments, pretending to practice while carefully not making eye contact. Avery was acutely aware of every point where their skin touched. We should probably go over what we know about each other, Lucas said finally, though he didn't let go of her hand. Right. Basic information. Avery tried to focus. I already know you went to culinary school and law school. What else? I live in a loft downtown. I run 5 miles every morning. And I have an unhealthy obsession with vintage motorcycles. Motorcycles? I restore them in my spare time. It drives my mother crazy. Avery tried to picture Lucas in a leather jacket working on a motorcycle engine. The image was disturbingly appealing. What about you? He asked. I live in a converted warehouse in the arts district. I do yoga badly, and I collect vintage vinyl records. What kind of music? Everything from jazz to indie rock. I have over 300 albums. Impressive. Favorite artist? Changes daily. But I always come back to Billie Holiday. Lucas smiled. Good choice. She's timeless. Avery realized they'd been talking for over an hour, and it hadn't felt forced or awkward. Maybe they could actually pull this off. So, she said reluctantly, pulling her hand free, Friday night, what exactly am I walking into? Lucas's expression grew more serious. Dinner at my parents' house. Just family and the key executives from your company. Very informal. Define informal. Casual dress code, but still elegant. Think cocktail party, not board meeting. And your parents? My father is straightforward, asks direct questions. My mother is intense. She'll want to know everything about you. Everything? Your background, your intentions, your life plan, your favorite color, your thoughts on children. Avery felt panic rising in her chest. Children? She's been waiting for grandchildren since I turned 30. How old are you now? 34. So she's been waiting 4 years for you to produce offspring. 4 very long years of constant hints and not so subtle pressure. Avery groaned. This is going to be a disaster. Not if we stick to the plan. Lucas leaned forward. Just follow my lead. Remember our backstory and try to look like you tolerate my presence. I think I can manage that. And Avery, Lucas's voice became more serious. My parents really want this to work out for me. They've been worried about my single status for years, so when this eventually ends, it'll be my fault. Avery finished. I'll be the one who broke your heart. Is that okay with you? Avery thought about it. In 2 weeks, she'd go back to being single. Lucas would get his family off his back for a while, and her career would be saved. It seemed like a fair trade. I can live with being the villain in your family story. You're not a villain. You're just helping me solve a problem while solving my own. Exactly. Lucas stood up and extended his hand. Partners? Avery shook his hand, trying to ignore the way her pulse jumped at the contact. Partners. As they walked out of the coffee shop together, Avery caught their reflection in the window. They actually looked like a couple walking close together, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, both of them relaxed and smiling. For just a moment she let herself imagine what it would be like if this were real. If Lucas really was her fiancé. If they really were planning a future together. If that ring on her finger meant what it appeared to mean. Then she reminded herself that this was just business, a mutually beneficial arrangement that would end in 2 weeks with a clean break and no complications. What could possibly go wrong? Thursday afternoon found Avery standing in front of her bedroom mirror holding up her 15th outfit option, while simultaneously panicking about the next evening's dinner. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Emergency practice session needed. My mother just called with 47 questions about you. Meet me at Giovanni's at 7. Avery stared at the message. 47 questions. What kind of person had 47 specific questions about their son's fake fiancé? She texted back. Should I be terrified? Absolutely. Wear the ring. We're going public with this tonight. 2 hours later, Avery walked into Giovanni's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, feeling like she was heading into battle. She'd chosen a navy blue dress that was professional yet feminine, and Lucas's grandmother's ring caught the light every time she moved her hand. She spotted Lucas immediately. He was sitting at a corner table looking devastating in a dark gray sweater that highlighted his eyes. When he saw her approaching, his face lit up with what appeared to be genuine pleasure. Wow, he said, standing to pull out her chair. You look incredible. Thank you. Avery tried to ignore how the compliment made her stomach flutter. So, what kind of interrogation am I preparing for? The worst kind. My mother has compiled a comprehensive background check disguised as casual conversation. Lucas sat back down, his expression turning serious. She wants to know about your family, your education, your career goals, your thoughts on marriage and children, your hobbies, your favorite books, movies, vacation destinations. She really did ask 47 questions. He stopped counting at 50. Avery felt dizzy. This is insane. No normal person needs that much information about their child's girlfriend. You haven't met Margaret Crestwood. She once hired a private investigator to research my college girlfriend's family tree. You're kidding. I wish I was. She wanted to make sure there were no genetic predispositions to undesirable traits. What happened to that girlfriend? She ran away to Europe and became a professional ski instructor. Last I heard, she was very happy in Switzerland. Avery laughed nervously. Should I start researching flights to Switzerland? Not yet. We can handle this. Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. But we need to synchronize our stories perfectly. The waiter appeared beside their table with perfect timing. Good evening. Can I start you folks with some wine? Perhaps something to celebrate? He gestured meaningfully at Avery's ring. Avery and Lucas exchanged glances. This was their first public test. Actually, Lucas said, his voice warming with apparent affection, we are celebrating. We just got engaged last weekend. Congratulations. The waiter beamed. How wonderful. How did he propose? If you don't mind me asking. Avery's mind went blank. They'd planned this. But suddenly, she couldn't remember a single detail. It was she started, then stopped. Lucas jumped in smoothly. I took her up to the rooftop of my building at sunset. She thought we were just going to watch the city lights. But I had the whole thing planned out. He got down on one knee right as the sun was setting. Avery added, the memory suddenly coming back to her. It was absolutely perfect. And the ring. The waiter admired the vintage diamond. It's stunning. It was my grandmother's, Lucas said softly, his thumb tracing circles on Avery's hand. She always said it would know the right woman. Avery felt her heart skip. The way he said it, looking directly into her eyes, made it sound completely real. How romantic. The waiter sighed. Young love is beautiful. I'll bring you our best champagne to celebrate. As the waiter hurried away, Avery realized she was staring at Lucas with what probably looked like genuine adoration. That was good, she whispered. Very convincing. You too. Nice touch with the sunset detail. I was just following your lead. We make a good team. The champagne arrived with a flourish, and suddenly other diners were looking their way, smiling at the obviously happy couple. Avery found herself leaning closer to Lucas, talking quietly and laughing at his stories about growing up in a business dynasty. Your turn, Lucas said after describing his mother's attempt to set him up with a senator's daughter. Tell me about your family. Not much to tell. My parents are both professors at UC Berkeley Literature and Philosophy. Very academic. Very liberal. Very horrified that I went into corporate marketing. They think you've sold out. They think I've betrayed my intellectual heritage by using my English degree to sell products instead of teaching or writing the great American novel. Have you ever wanted to write? Avery paused, surprised by the question. Actually, yes. I used to write short stories in college. I was pretty good at it. What stopped you? Reality. Student loans, rent, health insurance, all those glamorous adult responsibilities. Do you ever think about going back to it? Sometimes when I'm stuck in particularly boring meetings, I mentally write character sketches of my coworkers. Lucas laughed. What's my character sketch? Avery studied his face, considering. Mysterious CEO with hidden depths. Appears to be all business but secretly passionate about vintage motorcycles and perfect risotto. Has complicated relationship with powerful family. Probably brooding and misunderstood. Brooding? All good romantic heroes brood. It's like a requirement. And what makes you think I'm a romantic hero? The question hung in the air between them. Avery realized she'd been flirting without meaning to. Lucky guess, she said lightly. Their entree arrived, providing a welcome distraction. But as they ate, Avery became increasingly aware of how natural this felt. Lucas was funny and intelligent, asking thoughtful questions and actually listening to her answers. When she told him about her disastrous attempt to make Thanksgiving dinner last year, he laughed so hard he nearly choked on his pasta. You put the turkey in upside down? I didn't know there was a right way up. It's a dead bird. How hard could it be? Did it cook? Eventually, after 4 extra hours and a minor kitchen fire, remind me to handle all cooking duties in our fake relationship. Deal. I'll handle What am I good at in this relationship? Lucas considered this seriously. You're brilliant at strategy and planning. You notice details other people miss. You're funny without trying to be. And you have this way of making people feel like they matter. Avery felt her cheeks warm. That's really nice. I'm just being honest. They were interrupted by a commotion at the table next to them. A woman was angrily confronting her date, her voice getting louder by the minute. This is exactly why we're never going to work, she snapped. You don't listen. You don't care about my feelings. And you certainly don't understand what I need in a relationship. She stormed out, leaving her mortified date sitting alone with the check. Awkward, Avery whispered. Very. Lucas lowered his voice. Think they've been together long? First date, definitely. She's still trying to change him. How can you tell? The way she listed his flaws like she was reading from a manual. When you really know someone, you either accept their quirks or you don't. You don't try to renovate them. Is that your relationship philosophy? I suppose. What's yours? Lucas was quiet for a moment. I've always thought the right person should feel like coming home comfortable but not boring. Safe but still exciting. Have you ever felt that way about anyone? No, he said quietly. Have you? I've had relationships, but they always felt like work. Like I was constantly performing instead of just being myself. What about now? The question was casual, but something in his tone made Avery look up sharply. What do you mean? This tonight, does this feel like work? Avery considered the question honestly. It feels easy. Yeah, he said softly. It does. They finished dinner in comfortable conversation, and when the check came, they split it without discussion, just as they'd agreed. But as they walked to the parking garage together, Avery found herself reluctant for the evening to end. So, she said as they reached her car, think we're ready for tomorrow night? I think we'll survive. You're a natural at this couple thing. You're not so bad yourself. They stood there for a moment, and Avery became acutely aware that this felt like the end of a real date, the kind where you're not sure if he's going to kiss you goodnight, and you're not sure if you want him to. Avery, Lucas said softly. Yeah? Tomorrow night, when we're with my family, just remember that none of this is real. The words hit her like cold water. Of course. I know that. Good. Because my mother has a way of making everything feel more intense than it actually is. Don't let her get in your head. He won't. But as Avery drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late for that warning. Back in her apartment, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, slowly removing Lucas's grandmother's ring. In the restaurant, wearing it had felt natural. Now, placing it carefully in the velvet box, she felt strangely empty. It was just a piece of jewelry, a prop in their elaborate performance. So why did taking it off feel like losing something important? Avery shook her head firmly. Tomorrow night she would meet Lucas's family, charm his parents, secure her job, and begin the countdown to the end of their arrangement. Simple, professional, uncomplicated. She just needed to ignore the voice in her head that was whispering this. Was already much more complicated than either of them had planned. Friday evening arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train. Avery stood in front of her full-length mirror, adjusting her black cocktail dress for the 100th time in 10 minutes. The vintage diamond on her finger caught the light, sending tiny rainbows across her bedroom wall. In exactly 45 minutes, she would be sitting across from Lucas's parents, pretending to be madly in love with their son, while simultaneously trying to secure the biggest client contract of her career. No pressure whatsoever. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Leaving now. You've got this. Remember, we're crazy about each other. Avery stared at the message, her stomach doing acrobatic flips. The problem was, after their dinner the night before, the crazy about each other part was starting to feel less like acting and more like reality. The way he'd looked at her when he talked about coming home, the ease of their conversation, the reluctance she'd felt when the evening ended, none of that had been in their contract. She grabbed her purse and car keys, giving herself one final pep talk in the mirror. It's just business, Avery. Elaborate, potentially career-saving business. You can do this. 20 minutes later, she was pulling into the circular driveway of what could only be described as a mansion. The Crestwood family home was a stunning example of modern architecture nestled among perfectly manicured gardens. Warm light spilled from enormous windows, and she could see elegantly dressed figures moving around inside. Avery sat in her car for a moment, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were attempting. These weren't just any random people they needed to fool. This was Lucas's family, people who had known him his entire life. How were they supposed to convince them that a relationship that had started 3 days ago was real? Her phone rang, startling her out of her spiral of panic. You're sitting in your car freaking out, aren't you? Lucas's voice was warm with amusement. Avery looked toward the house and saw him standing at one of the front windows, phone pressed to his ear, waving at her. "How did you know?" "Because I've been watching you sit there for 5 minutes, and you have the same expression my business school classmates used to get before final exams. This is way more terrifying than final exams. Avery, look at me." She did, seeing him clearly through the window. Even from this distance she felt steadier. "We've got this. Remember yesterday how natural everything felt? Just be yourself, and follow my lead when you need to. My parents are going to love you. What if they don't? What if they see right through us? What if your mother asks me something we haven't prepared for? Then we improvise. You're brilliant at thinking on your feet. That's literally how we ended up in this situation." Avery laughed despite her nerves. "Right. Improvisation got us into this mess, and it's going to get us through it. Now come inside before my mother decides to come out there and physically drag you in. She's been watching from the kitchen window for the past 10 minutes. She's been watching me have a breakdown in your driveway. She thinks you're charmingly nervous about meeting the family." Her words, not mine. Avery groaned. "Great. I'm already providing entertainment. Comment, fiancé, time to face the music." Avery took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, and walked toward the front door. Lucas opened it before she could knock. For a moment, they just looked at each other. He was wearing a navy blazer over dark jeans, and the combination of formal and casual suited him perfectly. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi, yourself. Ready for this?" "Absolutely not." "Perfect. Neither am I." He leaned down and kissed her cheek. A gesture that appeared casual, but sent electricity shooting through her entire nervous system. "Just remember," he whispered in her ear, "we're disgustingly happy together." Before Avery could respond, a woman's voice called from inside the house. "Lucas Michael Crestwood. Stop keeping that poor girl on the doorstep and bring her inside this instant." "That would be my mother," Lucas said with a grin. "Fair warning, she's going to hug you immediately and ask you at least 15 questions before we make it to the living room." 15 questions? That doesn't sound so bad. Those are just the warm-up questions. Lucas took her hand, and they walked into the foyer together. Avery barely had time to register the soaring ceilings and elegant decor before a petite woman with perfectly styled silver hair descended upon them like a well-dressed tornado. "Avery!" Finally, Margaret Crestwood pulled Avery into an enthusiastic embrace that somehow managed to be both overwhelming and genuinely warm. "I am absolutely thrilled to meet you, darling. Lucas has told us so much about you, though clearly not nearly enough, because I have about 1,000,000 questions." "Mom," Lucas warned, but he was smiling. "Hush. You. I've been waiting 34 years to meet the woman who finally captured my son's heart." Margaret stepped back and held Avery at arm's length, studying her with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You're even more beautiful than he described, which I didn't think was possible, given how he's been gushing about you." Avery felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He's been gushing?" "For weeks. Avery this. Avery that. I was beginning to think he'd made you up." Margaret linked her arm through Avery's back. "Now come, everyone's dying to meet you. Your colleagues from work are already here, and I've been keeping them entertained with embarrassing stories about Lucas's childhood." As they walked toward the living room, Avery caught Lucas's expression of mock horror. "What kind of embarrassing stories?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Well, there was the time he decided to help in the kitchen when he was 8 and somehow managed to explode a bag of flour. Mom, please. Or when he was 16 and tried to impress a girl by cooking her dinner, but set off the smoke alarm and the fire department showed up. I was learning. The firemen were very understanding," Margaret continued, clearly enjoying herself. Though they did suggest he stick to takeout for a while. Avery found herself genuinely laughing. "So the cooking skills came later?" "Much later, and with professional supervision." Margaret patted her son's arm affectionately. "But he's quite accomplished now. I assume he's been cooking for you." Avery glanced at Lucas, remembering their cover story. "He made me the most incredible risotto last week. I'd never had anything like it. That's my boy. He gets his culinary talents from his grandfather." Margaret beamed proudly. "Now tell me about your family, dear. Lucas mentioned your parents are professors." "Yes, both at UC Berkeley. Literature and philosophy. How wonderful. Academics. They must be so proud of your success in marketing." Avery nearly choked. If only Margaret knew how her parents actually felt about her career choice. "They're supportive," she managed. "And siblings?" "Just me. I'm an only child." "Perfect. Lucas is too. So you'll understand each other completely. No sibling rivalry. No complex family dynamics to navigate." They entered the living room. and Avery was relieved to see familiar faces from her company, mixed among what she assumed were Lucas's family members and friends. Madeline Voss was deep in conversation with a distinguished older man who had to be Lucas's father, while several of her colleagues were clustered around what appeared to be a bar that rivaled most actual bars. Avery. Madeline spotted her immediately and glided over. There's our star, and this must be the famous fiancé we've heard absolutely nothing about. Avery felt Lucas tense beside her. This was exactly the kind of comment that could derail everything before they'd even properly started. Guilty as charged, Lucas said smoothly, extending his hand. Lucas Crestwood, and you must be Madeline. Avery talks about you constantly. All good things, I hope, Madeline replied, shaking his hand while studying him with the intensity of a laser scanner. Nothing but, she has tremendous respect for your leadership. Madeline's expression softened slightly. Well, that's lovely to hear. And how did you two manage to keep this romance completely secret? Avery hasn't mentioned you once, and I pride myself on knowing my employees' personal lives. Avery's mind raced. They hadn't prepared for this specific question, and Madeline's tone suggested she was genuinely suspicious. Actually, Avery said, that's entirely my fault. I've always been pretty private about my personal life at work. I didn't want our relationship to become office gossip. Smart policy, a new voice said behind them. Avery turned to see Lucas's father approaching, a tall man with silver hair and the same piercing hazel eyes as his son. Richard Crestwood, he said, shaking Avery's hand. Welcome to the family, Avery. Thank you, Mr. Crestwood. It's wonderful to meet you. Please call me Richard. We're all family here. He turned to Madeline with a politician's smile. I hope you don't mind that we stole your marketing director for the evening. From what I hear, she's quite the asset to your company. She certainly is, Madeline agreed. In fact, she's leading the Crestwood project. Is she now? Richard's eyebrows rose with interest. How delightfully convenient, though I imagine that might create some interesting dynamics. Mixing business with family. Avery felt sweat beating on her forehead. This conversation was heading into dangerous territory. We're keeping things completely professional during work hours, Lucas said firmly. Avery's expertise speaks for itself. Of course it does, Richard agreed. I've reviewed her preliminary proposals, and I'm thoroughly impressed. You've got excellent taste, son in both business partners and life partners. Before anyone could respond to that loaded comment, Margaret appeared at Avery's elbow with a champagne flute. Enough shop talk, everyone. This is a celebration. Avery, come meet Lucas's Aunt Catherine. She's been dying to hear about the proposal. As Margaret steered her away from the group, Avery caught Lucas's eye. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod that somehow managed to be reassuring. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions, small talk, and increasingly detailed questions about their relationship. Avery found herself describing their first date to Lucas's cousin, explaining their shared love of hiking to his uncle, and somehow inventing an elaborate story about how Lucas had surprised her with a weekend trip to Napa Valley for their 3-month anniversary. The scary part was how easily the lies came and how much she was beginning to believe them herself. When she described the way Lucas had supposedly looked at her during their first dinner together, she was actually remembering the way he'd looked at her at Giovanni's the night before. When she talked about feeling like she'd finally found someone who understood her, she wasn't entirely sure she was acting anymore. Avery, darling, Margaret appeared beside her as she was talking to one of Lucas's business school friends. Would you mind helping me in the kitchen for a moment? I want to get your opinion on dessert. Avery glanced around looking for Lucas, but he was deep in conversation with Madeline and his father on the other side of the room. Of course, she said, following Margaret toward what she assumed was the kitchen. The Crestwood kitchen was a masterpiece of modern design, all marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. Margaret closed the door behind them and turned to Avery with an expression that was suddenly much more serious than it had been all evening. Sit, Margaret said, gesturing to one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. Avery perched on the edge of the stool, every nerve in her body suddenly on high alert. Is everything okay? Margaret poured herself a glass of wine and leaned against the counter, studying Avery with those sharp eyes that were so much like Lucas's. I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Avery's throat went dry. Okay, do you love my son? The question hung in the air between them like a live wire. Avery opened her mouth to give the rehearsed answer, but something in Margaret's expression stopped her. Avery started, then stopped. Because I've been watching you all evening, Margaret continued, and you're either the most accomplished actress I've ever met, or you're genuinely crazy about him. Avery felt her carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. Why would you think I'm acting? Because, "Sweetheart, I've seen every woman Lucas has ever brought home, and none of them looked at him the way you do." "How do I look at him?" Margaret smiled, and for the first time all evening it reached her eyes. "Like he hung the moon and you're still figuring out how he managed it." Avery felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Mrs. Crestwood, Margaret, please, Margaret, your son is an incredible man. Any woman would be lucky to be with him." "That's not what I asked." Avery looked down at the engagement ring on her finger, this beautiful symbol of a love that was entirely fictional. "It's complicated. Love usually is." Before Avery could figure out how to respond, the kitchen door swung open and Lucas walked in, his expression concerned. "Everything okay in here?" "You two disappeared, and I was starting to worry." "Just having a little girl talk," Margaret said lightly, but her eyes remained fixed on Avery. "I was telling Avery how happy I am that you finally found someone who appreciates you properly." "Mom," Lucas warned, moving to stand beside Avery. "What? I'm not allowed to express my approval?" Margaret's tone was innocent, but Avery could see the calculation in her eyes. "I was just saying how lovely it is to see you with someone who looks at you like you're the most important person in the world." Avery felt heat flood her cheeks. Did she really look at him that way? And if so, when had that started happening? "We should probably get back to our guests," Lucas said, but his hand found Avery's shoulder in a gesture that felt protective rather than performative. "Of course, but Avery dear, before we go back out there, I have one tiny favor to ask." "What's that?" Avery managed. "Would you mind terribly if I announce the engagement officially tonight? I know you wanted to keep things quiet, but everyone's here, and I'm just so excited." Avery felt the room start to spin. An official announcement would make this real in a way that terrified her. Once Margaret Crestwood announced her son's engagement to a room full of business associates and family friends, there would be no quiet way to end this arrangement. "Mom, we haven't really discussed timing yet," Lucas said carefully. "Oh, nonsense. When you're this happy, why wait? Besides, Avery's boss is here, all the important people from both companies. It's perfect timing." Avery looked at Lucas, seeing her own panic reflected in his eyes. They had approximately 30 seconds to make a decision that would either save their arrangement or complicate it beyond all recognition. Actually, Avery heard herself saying, "I think that would be wonderful." Both Lucas and Margaret stared at her in surprise. "Really?" Margaret clapped her hands together. "Oh, how marvelous. This is going to be perfect." As Margaret bustled around gathering champagne glasses and preparing for her announcement, Lucas moved closer to Avery. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered. Avery looked at him, at this man who had somehow become the center of her universe in the span of 3 days, and realized she wasn't sure about anything anymore, except that she wasn't ready for this to end. "No," she whispered back, "but let's do it anyway." "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret's voice rang out as they returned to the living room. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment." The room quieted, and Avery felt every eye turn toward them. Lucas's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "I have the most wonderful news to share," Margaret continued, her voice bright with genuine joy. "Lucas and Avery are engaged." The room erupted in applause and congratulations. Madeline's face lit up with surprise and delight. Richard beamed proudly. Lucas's relatives surged forward with hugs and well wishes. And through it all, Avery stood there holding Lucas's hand, smiling and accepting congratulations for an engagement that was supposed to be fake, but was starting to feel more real than anything she'd ever experienced. She just hoped she would survive whatever came next. Avery woke up on Saturday morning to 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and the horrifying realization that she was now officially engaged to a man she'd known for exactly 4 days. She lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the complete chaos her life had become. The engagement ring sat on her nightstand, catching the morning light and mocking her with its innocent sparkle. Last night, after Margaret's announcement, the evening had transformed into an impromptu engagement party. There had been more champagne, impromptu toasts, and a seemingly endless parade of people wanting to hear their love story. The worst part, by the end of the night, Avery had almost convinced herself it was all real. Her phone buzzed with another text, this one from her mother. "Darling, just saw the announcement in the Chronicle Society pages. When were you planning to tell your parents you were engaged? Call me immediately." Avery sat bolt upright. The Society pages? She grabbed her laptop and quickly navigated to the San Francisco Chronicle's website. There, in the lifestyle section, was a photo of her and Lucas from last night, his arm around her waist. both of them laughing at something his uncle had said. The headline read, "Crestwood Industries heir announces engagement to marketing executive." "No, no, 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 no," Avery muttered, scrolling through the article. It was worse than she'd imagined. The piece included quotes from Margaret about her delight in welcoming Avery to the family, speculation about a potential merger between Crestwood Industries and Avery's company, and even a mention of her parents' academic careers. Her phone rang. "Mom." Avery considered letting it go to voicemail, but she knew that would only delay the inevitable. Her mother had the persistence of a bloodhound when she wanted information. "Hi, Mom. Avery Elizabeth Quinn. What in the world is going on?" Her mother's voice was a mixture of excitement and exasperation. "I had to learn about my daughter's engagement from the newspaper." "The newspaper, Avery." "Mom, I can explain. You most certainly can. And you will. Your father and I are driving down there right now." Avery's blood ran cold. "You're what?" "We're coming to San Francisco to meet this mysterious fiancé of yours. We'll be there by noon." "Mom, you really don't need to." "Avery, sweetheart, I love you dearly, but you have never mentioned this man once in any of our conversations. Not once. And suddenly you're engaged to the heir of some business empire?" "I may be a literature professor, but I wasn't born yesterday." Avery closed her eyes, feeling the walls of her elaborate deception closing in around her. It all happened very quickly. "Apparently, according to this article, you've been dating for 6 months. That would put your first date sometime in October, which is interesting because in October, you called me crying about how you'd never find anyone and were going to die alone surrounded by cats." Avery winced. Her mother's memory was annoyingly precise. "People change, Mom." "Yes, they do. Which is why your father and I are coming to meet this Lucas person and make sure he's worthy of our daughter." "Mom, please. No arguments. We'll see you at noon. And Avery, he better be wonderful. Because if he's not, I'm going to have some very pointed questions about why you felt the need to lie to your parents." The line went dead. Avery stared at her phone in horror. Her parents were coming to meet Lucas, her parents, who knew her better than anyone else in the world and would see through their charade in approximately 30 seconds. She speed-dialed Lucas's number. "Avery." His voice was groggy, like he'd just woken up. "Everything okay?" "No, nothing is okay. Everything is the opposite of okay." "Whoa, slow down. What happened?" "We're in the newspaper, the Chronicle. There's a photo, and everything, and my parents saw it, and now they're driving down here to meet you, and they know I'm lying because I told my mom in October that I was going to die alone. And, Avery, breathe. I can't breathe. My parents are going to be here in 3 hours expecting to meet my wonderful fiancé, and instead they're going to discover that I've been living an elaborate lie for the past 4 days." "Okay, first of all, you need to calm down. Second, what time did you say they're coming?" "Noon. It's 9:30 now. That gives us time to prepare." "Prepare? Lucas, these are my parents. They've known me for 29 years. They can tell when I'm lying about eating the last cookie, let alone being engaged. What are they like?" Avery paced around her bedroom, running her free hand through her hair. "My dad is quiet and observant. He notices everything but doesn't say much until he's formed a complete opinion. My mom is intense. She asks a million questions and remembers every answer. She once caught me in a lie about a high school party because I said I was at Sarah's house but mentioned smelling pizza. And she knew Sarah's family didn't eat pizza because Sarah's dad was lactose intolerant. That's very thorough. She's a literature professor. She analyzes subtext and symbolism for a living. She's going to take one look at us and know something's wrong. Not necessarily. We've gotten pretty good at this acting thing." Avery thought about the night before, about how natural it had felt to be by his side. How easy their conversation had been. How her heart had skipped when he'd put his arm around her for photos. "That's what I'm afraid of." "What do you mean?" "Nothing. Never mind. The point is my parents are coming, and we need to figure out how to convince them that we're really engaged. Where do you want to meet them?" What? "Your parents. Where should we meet them?" "Your apartment? A restaurant? Somewhere public might be better for a first meeting." Avery stopped pacing. "You're actually going to do this? Meet my parents?" "Avery, we're engaged, remember? Meeting the parents is kind of expected, but this is going way beyond our original agreement. This is meeting my family. This is getting them involved in our lie." "I know, but what's the alternative? You tell them the truth?" Avery considered this. She could come clean. Admit she'd gotten herself into an impossible situation at work and had dragged a complete stranger into her mess. Her parents would be disappointed, confused, and probably worried about her judgment. They might even convince her to quit her job rather than continue the charade. Or she could double down on the lie and hope that somehow, some way, she and Lucas could pull off the performance of their lives. "Okay," she said finally, "but we need ground rules. More rules, different rules. Survival rules. First, we meet them at a restaurant, public place, limited time frame, easy escape route if things go badly." "Agreed. What else?" "We need our story straight, not just the basic stuff, but details. My parents are going to ask about everything. How we met, when you knew you loved me, what our plans are, when we're getting married, where we want to live, if we want kids." "Kids?" Lucas' voice cracked slightly. "My mother has been waiting for grandchildren almost as long as yours has. Fair warning." "Right. Kids. We'll figure that out." "Third rule. No matter what happens, we stick together. If one of us starts to crack, the other one jumps in. We're a team. Always." Something in the way he said it made Avery's chest tighten. "Okay. I'll make a reservation somewhere nice, but not too fancy. Somewhere we can talk, but not too privately." "Avery?" "Yeah? It's going to be okay. We've handled everything else so far. Everything else didn't involve my parents." "True. But we're smart, we're resourceful, and we've had good practice. Plus we have something going for us that we didn't have before." "What's that?" "People are expecting us to be in love. Your parents want to believe this is real. They want you to be happy. That expectation is going to work in our favor." Avery wasn't entirely convinced, but his confidence was reassuring. "Okay, let's do this. I'll pick you up at 11:30. Make it 11:15. I need time to mentally prepare before they arrive." "Deal." "And Avery, what now? Wear the ring." 2 hours later, Avery was sitting in the passenger seat of Lucas's car heading toward downtown San Francisco, and what felt like certain doom. She'd chosen a restaurant called Bella Vista, good food, reasonable noise levels, and enough space that she wouldn't feel trapped if things went badly. "Okay," she said, clutching her purse in her lap. "Let's go over this one more time. We met at the farmer's market in October. You were lost in the produce section. I helped you pick vegetables. We got coffee afterward." Lucas recited, "First date dinner at that little Italian place in North Beach. You wore a blue dress and got nervous and knocked over your water glass. When did you know you loved me? 3 weeks later, when you tried to cook me dinner and nearly burned down your kitchen but laughed about it instead of getting upset." Avery nodded approvingly. "When did you propose?" "Last weekend on my building's rooftop during sunset. I got down on one knee. You cried. I may have cried a little too." "Good. Wedding plans, small ceremony. Probably next spring. We want our families there, but nothing too elaborate. Kids, we've talked about it. We both want them. Maybe 2 or 3. But we want to be married for a year or 2 first. Where will we live? We're looking at places together, probably something bigger than either of our current apartments, with space for a home office for you and a proper kitchen for me." Avery was impressed. They'd covered all of this on the phone that morning, but hearing him recite it back made it sound almost believable. "What if they ask about our families meeting each other? We're planning a dinner next month, both sets of parents. We wanted to do it before the official wedding planning gets too intense. And if they ask about—" "Avery." Lucas reached over and took her hand. "We've got this. Stop overthinking it." His hand was warm and steady, and Avery felt some of her anxiety ease. "Sorry. I just really don't want to mess this up." "You won't." "We won't." They pulled into the restaurant's parking lot, and Avery spotted her parents' familiar silver Honda Civic. "They're already here." "How can you tell?" "That's their car. They're always early for everything." Avery took a deep breath. "Okay. Showtime." They walked into the restaurant hand in hand, and Avery immediately spotted her parents at a corner table. Her father, tall and lean with graying hair and reading glasses, was studying the menu with typical academic intensity. Her mother, petite and energetic with auburn hair, only slightly faded with age, was people-watching with barely contained curiosity. The moment her mother saw them approaching, her face lit up with a mixture of excitement and maternal concern. "Avery," Eleanor Quinn stood up and pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. "There's my engaged daughter." "Hi, Mom." Avery hugged her back, breathing in the familiar scent of her mother's perfume, and feeling for a moment like she was 12 years old again. "And you must be Lucas." Eleanor turned to him with the bright, analytical smile Avery knew meant she was already forming impressions and filing them away for later discussion. "Mrs. Quinn, it's wonderful to meet you." Lucas stepped forward with easy confidence and shook her hand warmly. "Avery talks about you and Dr. Quinn constantly. Please call me Eleanor. And this is my husband, David. Avery's father stood up more slowly, his dark eyes studying Lucas with the same intensity he usually reserved for particularly challenging philosophical texts. Quinn. Lucas extended his hand. It's an honor to meet you, sir. David shook his hand, and Avery held her breath. Her father's handshake analysis was legendary. He could supposedly tell everything he needed to know about a person from their grip, eye contact, and posture. Lucas, David said simply, please sit. We have a lot to discuss. As they settled into their seats, Avery caught Lucas's eye across the table. He gave her an almost imperceptible wink that somehow managed to be both reassuring and flirtatious at the same time. So, Lucas, Eleanor began, and Avery knew the interrogation was officially starting. Avery tells us you work in technology. What specifically do you do? I'm the president of Crestwood Industries. We focus primarily on sustainable technology solutions for urban development. Interesting, David mused. And how did you become interested in that field? Originally, I wanted to be a chef, Lucas said, with a self-deprecating smile. I actually went to culinary school for a year before I realized I was more interested in the business side of the food industry, which led me to business school, which eventually led me to technology. Eleanor's eyebrows rose with interest. A chef? How fascinating. Do you still cook? Every chance I get. In fact, that's how Avery and I bonded. She's, let's say, better at appreciating good food than making it. Hey, Avery protested, but she was smiling. I'm learning. She's a wonderful student, Lucas said, looking at her with what appeared to be genuine affection. Very enthusiastic even when things don't go exactly as planned. That sounds like our Avery, David said dryly. She once tried to bake us a birthday cake, and somehow managed to turn it into something that could have been used as building material. Dad, it's true. We had to chip it off the pan with a chisel. Lucas laughed a warm, genuine sound that made Avery's stomach flutter. I'd love to hear more Avery cooking disaster stories. Oh, we have plenty, Eleanor said gleefully. There was the Thanksgiving stuffing incident of 2018. Mom, please, what happened? Lucas asked, clearly enjoying himself. She confused salt and sugar in the recipe. The turkey was inedible, but the stuffing was like eating a salt lick. We ordered pizza, Avery said defensively. It was a perfectly good Thanksgiving. It was memorable, David agreed. As the conversation continued, Avery found herself relaxing despite her earlier panic. Lucas was charming without being fake, answering her parents' questions with just the right balance of confidence and humility. He asked thoughtful questions about their work, listened attentively to their answers, and somehow managed to make their elaborate love story sound completely natural. The dangerous moment came when Eleanor asked about their future plans. So, when are you thinking about the wedding? She asked, leaning forward with the intensity Avery recognized as her mother's gathering information for future analysis expression. We're thinking next spring, Avery said. Nothing too elaborate. We want our families there, but we're both pretty private people. How lovely. And children? Have you discussed children? Avery felt her face flush. This was exactly the kind of question that could trip them up. We've talked about it, Lucas said smoothly. We both want kids, but we want to enjoy being married for a little while first. Get to know each other as husband and wife before we add more people to the mix. Very wise. David nodded approvingly. Too many young couples rush into parenthood without establishing their partnership first. Exactly, Avery agreed, grateful for her father's unexpected support. And Avery, Eleanor continued, are you planning to keep working after you're married? Of course. I love my job, and Lucas is very supportive of my career. Absolutely. Lucas confirmed. Avery's brilliant at what she does. I'd never ask her to give that up. Eleanor beamed. Wonderful. I hate to see bright women sacrifice their ambitions for marriage. Never. Lucas said firmly. Avery's ambition is one of the things I love most about her. The way he said it, looking directly at her with those intense hazel eyes, made Avery forget for a moment that they were acting. Her heart did a little flip, and she had to look away before she did something stupid like lean over and kiss him right there at the table. So tell us about your family, Lucas, David said. We'd love to hear about your parents. My father founded the company about 30 years ago. He's very focused, very driven. My mother is, well, she's wonderful, but she has very strong opinions about everything, especially about my personal life. Mothers tend to do that, Eleanor said with a knowing smile. How did they react to the engagement? My mother was thrilled, Lucas said, and Avery could hear the genuine warmth in his voice. She's been waiting for me to settle down for years. She adores Avery. And your father? He's impressed with Avery's professional accomplishments, and he can see how happy she makes me. Avery felt a strange flutter in her chest at the way Lucas talked about his parents' approval. For a moment she found herself wishing it was all real, that she really was the woman who had captured Lucas Crestwood's heart and won over his family. The lunch continued for another hour, with conversation flowing easily between the four of them. Avery's parents asked about Lucas's hobbies: motorcycles, cooking, hiking, his education, Harvard Business School, Johnson & Wales culinary program, and his relationship with Avery head over heels in love. Couldn't imagine life without her. Every answer came naturally, and Lucas somehow managed to weave in details about Avery that were both accurate and endearing. He mentioned her vinyl record collection, her terrible sense of direction, her habit of talking to herself when she was concentrating, and her secret love of cheesy romantic comedies. The fact that he'd noticed and remembered all of these things about her after only 4 days was both impressive and slightly terrifying. As they were finishing their coffee, Eleanor excused herself to use the restroom, leaving Avery alone with the two most important men in her life. "I like him," David said simply. Once Eleanor was out of earshot, Avery nearly choked on her coffee. "Really? He's intelligent, respectful, and he clearly adores you. Most importantly, he doesn't seem intimidated by your mother, which is essential for family harmony." Lucas laughed. "Eleanor is wonderful. I can see where Avery gets her strength and intelligence." David studied Lucas for a moment longer. "You know, when Avery was little, she used to tell us elaborate stories about imaginary adventures. She was incredibly creative. But we could always tell when she was making things up because she would get this particular expression on her face." Avery's blood turned to ice. "Dad, she doesn't have that expression now," David continued, his eyes moving between Avery and Lucas, "which tells me that whatever this is, it's real for her." Avery stared at her father, trying to process what he'd just said. Did he know? Was he warning Lucas, or was he genuinely convinced that their relationship was authentic? "Avery's the most genuine person I've ever met," Lucas said quietly. "What you see is what you get. No games. No pretense. It's one of the things I fell in love with first." David nodded slowly. "Good. Because if you hurt her, I will hunt you down and make you very sorry you were ever born." The threat was delivered in such a calm, academic tone that it took a moment for the words to register. When they did, Lucas's eyes widened slightly. "Understood, sir. Excellent. I think we understand each other perfectly." Eleanor returned to the table just as the check arrived. Avery reached for her purse, but Lucas was already handing his credit card to the server. "Lunch is on me," he said. "It's the least I can do for keeping Avery's engagement secret from you for so long." "That's very sweet. Thank you," Eleanor said. "And we completely understand about wanting to keep things private. Young people deserve to figure things out for themselves before the whole family gets involved." As they stood to leave, Eleanor pulled Avery aside for a private mother-daughter moment. "He's wonderful, sweetheart," she whispered. "I can see why you fell for him, Mom. And the way he looks at you like you're the most precious thing in the world. Your father and I were starting to worry that you'd never find someone who appreciated how special you are." Avery felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Thanks, Mom. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Don't let this one get away. Men like Lucas don't come along often." Avery glanced over at Lucas, who was deep in conversation with her father about sustainable energy policy. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and smiled at her, and her heart did that ridiculous flipping thing again. "I'll try not to," she whispered. They said their goodbyes in the parking lot with promises to get together soon, and plans for the parents to meet each other in the coming weeks. Avery's parents drove away with enthusiastic waves, leaving her and Lucas standing alone by his car. "Well," Lucas said, "that went better than expected." "You were amazing," Avery said, and she meant it. "They loved you. Your parents are great. I can see where you get your intelligence and your strength and your tendency to overthink everything." "That too." They stood there for a moment, neither of them making a move toward the car. Avery was acutely aware that they had successfully navigated another major hurdle in their fake relationship. But instead of feeling relieved, she felt strangely melancholy. "Lucas." "Yeah?" "My dad said something while my mom was in the bathroom. He said he could tell this was real for me." Lucas's expression became unreadable. "What do you think he meant by that?" "I don't know, but it scared me." "Why?" Avery looked down at the engagement ring on her finger, this beautiful symbol of a love that was supposed to be entirely fictional. "Because I think he might be right." The admission hung in the air between them like a confession. Lucas was very quiet for a very long time. "Avery, I know this is supposed to be fake. I know we have rules and boundaries and an expiration date, but somewhere between Thursday night and right now this stopped feeling like acting for me too." The simple admission made Avery's heart race. Really? Really? Which is a problem because this has to end. I know. They got into the car in silence, both of them lost in thought. As Lucas drove her home, Avery stared out the window and tried to figure out how she'd gotten herself into a situation where she was falling in love with someone who was contractually obligated to break her heart in 10 days. The worst part was she was pretty sure he was falling too, and that made everything infinitely more complicated. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of increasingly elaborate deceptions and heart-stopping moments of almost being discovered. Avery and Lucas had fallen into a routine that felt dangerously close to a real relationship. Morning coffee dates before work, lunch meetings that lasted longer than necessary, evening strategy sessions that turned into genuine conversations about their hopes, fears, and dreams. The Crestwood Industries campaign was progressing beautifully. Avery's team had developed a comprehensive rebranding strategy that Richard Crestwood had approved enthusiastically, and Madeline was already hinting about potential promotions and expanded responsibilities. Everything was going exactly according to plan, except for the minor detail that Avery was now completely, irrevocably head over heels in love with her fake fiancé. It had started small, the way her heart raced when he smiled at her during meetings, the flutter in her stomach when he texted her good morning, the way she found herself looking forward to their pretend dates more than she'd ever anticipated real ones. But by the end of the second week she had to face the terrifying truth. This wasn't acting anymore. Not for her. And she was increasingly certain not for him either. The problem was their contract, the very specific, legally minded document they'd both signed, that explicitly stated this arrangement would end cleanly with no emotional complications. In 3 days, the Crestwood project would be complete. Their fake engagement would serve its purpose, and they would go back to being strangers. The thought made Avery physically ill. Tuesday morning found her sitting in her office, staring at her computer screen without actually seeing anything on it. The engagement ring felt heavy on her finger, a constant reminder of the beautiful lie she was living. In 72 hours, she would have to take it off forever and pretend that the past 2 weeks hadn't been the happiest of her entire life. Avery. Her assistant Lauren knocked on the doorframe. Lucas is here to see you. Avery's heart performed its usual acrobatic routine at the mention of his name. Sent him in. Lucas walked into her office carrying 2 coffee cups and wearing the navy suit that made his eyes look like storm clouds. He closed the door behind him and set one of the cups on her desk. Thought you might need caffeine, he said, but his usual easy smile seemed forced. Thanks. Avery accepted the cup gratefully, breathing in the familiar scent of her favorite vanilla latte. Even in her coffee order, he paid attention to details that mattered to her. We need to talk, Lucas said, settling into the chair across from her desk. Avery's stomach dropped. Those 4 words had never led to anything good in the history of human communication. About what? About Friday. Friday, the final presentation to the Crestwood Industries board, followed by what was supposed to be their breakup. They'd planned it all out. A mutual decision that they were moving too fast, a desire to focus on their careers, a promise to remain friends. Clean, simple, and completely devastating. What about Friday? Lucas leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. I've been thinking about our arrangement. And I think we need to end it early. The words hit Avery like a physical blow. She set down her coffee cup with shaking hands, trying to keep her expression neutral. Why? Because this is getting complicated in ways we didn't anticipate. Avery forced herself to speak calmly. Complicated how? Lucas stood up and began pacing in front of her desk. Running his hands through his hair in the gesture she'd learned meant he was trying to work through a difficult problem. Avery, when we started this, it was supposed to be simple, a business arrangement that benefited both of us. No emotions, no attachments, no complications. I remember, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being simple. Avery's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. What are you saying? Lucas stopped pacing and looked directly at her. I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, and that wasn't part of the deal. The confession hung in the air between them like a live wire. Avery stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she'd just heard. You're what? I'm in love with you, Lucas repeated, his voice quiet but steady. I'm in love with your terrible cooking and your vinyl record collection and the way you talk to yourself when you're concentrating. I'm in love with how you light up when you talk about work and how you worry about everyone else before yourself and how you make me laugh even when I'm having the worst day of my life. Avery felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Lucas, and I think you feel the same way. She did. She absolutely did. But hearing him say it out loud made it real, in a way that terrified her. This wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. I know, but it did happen. And now we have a choice to make. What kind of choice? Lucas moved around her desk and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. We can stick to our original plan, end this on Friday, go back to our separate lives, and pretend the past 2 weeks never happened. Or we can see what happens if we stop pretending. Avery looked down at their joined hands at the engagement ring that had started as a prop but now felt like a promise. But what about your family? My job? All the lies we've told? We'll figure it out together. What if we can't? What if this whole thing falls apart and we lose everything? Lucas reached up and cupped her face with one hand, his thumb tracing gently across her cheek. What if it doesn't? What if this is the real thing, Avery? What if all those lies we told about being in love were actually the truth? Before Avery could respond, her office door burst open. Madeline Voss strode in, her face flushed with excitement and something that looked dangerously like triumph. Avery, wonderful news. I just got off the phone with Richard Crestwood, and oh, Madeline stopped short, taking in the scene before her. Lucas kneeling beside Avery's chair, his hand on her face, both of them looking like they'd been caught in an incredibly intimate moment. I'm sorry, Madeline said, though her tone suggested she wasn't sorry at all. I didn't realize you were having a personal moment during work hours. Lucas stood up slowly, his professional mask sliding back into place. Madeline, good morning. Lucas, Madeline's smile was sharp as a blade. How convenient that you're here. I was just about to share some exciting news with Avery about the Crestwood project. Avery felt a chill run down her spine. Something in Madeline's tone suggested this wasn't going to be good news. What kind of news? Avery managed to ask. Well, as I mentioned, I just spoke with your future father-in-law, Madeline said, emphasizing the relationship with unmistakable satisfaction, and he's so pleased with your work on the campaign that he's decided to make some changes to our arrangement. What kind of changes? Lucas asked, his voice carefully neutral. He's moving up the timeline. Instead of launching the campaign next quarter, he wants to fast-track everything. The final presentation is moved to tomorrow, and if the board approves, which Richard assures me, we'll be implementing immediately. Avery felt the blood drain from her face. Tomorrow. They weren't ready for tomorrow. They still had 3 days left of their arrangement. 3 days to figure out how to navigate the transition from fake to real. Tomorrow, she repeated weakly. Isn't it wonderful? Madeline's smile widened. And here's the best part. Richard is so confident in our partnership that he's already talking about a long-term contract, a very long-term contract that would essentially make Crestwood Industries our primary client for the next 5 years. Avery's mind raced. A 5-year contract with Crestwood Industries would be a career-making opportunity. It would also mean 5 years of working closely with Lucas's family, 5 years of pretending their relationship was real, or 5 years of trying to explain why they'd broken up immediately after securing the contract. That's amazing, Avery said, though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. Yes, it is. Madeline agreed, which is why I'm sure you'll understand when I say that this relationship of yours couldn't have better timing. Nothing says stable, long-term partnership like family connections. The implication was crystal clear. Avery's relationship with Lucas wasn't just a personal matter anymore. It was a business asset that Madeline had no intention of letting go. Of course, Avery said faintly. Excellent. I'll let you two get back to your planning. Madeline's smile was pure predator as she headed for the door. Oh, and Avery, I'll need you to stay late tonight to finalize the presentation materials. This is too important to leave anything to chance. The door closed behind Madeline with a soft click that somehow sounded like a prison door slamming shut. Avery and Lucas stared at each other in complete silence for several long moments. Well, Lucas said finally, that complicates things. Complicates things? Avery laughed, but there was no humor in it. Lucas, we're trapped. If we break up now, it'll look like I was using you to secure the contract. If we stay together, we're committing to a lie that involves both our families and our careers for the next 5 years. Maybe it doesn't have to be a lie. Avery looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean, maybe this is the universe telling us to stop overthinking everything and just admit what we both know is true, which is that we're perfect for each other. That this fake relationship is the most real thing that's ever happened to either of us. That we're both terrified of admitting how we feel, because it means taking a risk. Avery felt tears welling up in her eyes. But what if we try this for real and it doesn't work out? What if we fall flat on our faces and everyone discovers we started this whole thing as a lie? Yes, exactly. Lucas moved closer, taking her hands again. Avery, what if we don't? What if this is actually the beginning of something amazing? Before Avery could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and groaned. "It's my mother." "Ansvaret," Lucas said. "We'll figure this out." Avery picked up the phone, trying to inject some normality into her voice. "Hi, Mom." "Avery, darling, I have the most wonderful news. More wonderful news." "Great." Avery caught Lucas's questioning look and shook her head. "Your father and I have been talking, and we've decided to throw you an engagement party." Avery's stomach dropped to somewhere around her ankles. "A what?" "An engagement party. This weekend. We've already called Lucas's parents, and Margaret is absolutely thrilled. She's driving down Friday night, and we're planning the whole thing for Saturday evening." "Mom, that's really not necessary." "Nonsense. Our only daughter gets engaged, and we're going to celebrate properly. We've already booked the club, ordered flowers, and started calling relatives. Your cousin Michelle is flying in from Portland, and Uncle Robert is driving down from Sacramento." Avery closed her eyes, feeling the walls of her elaborate deception closing in from all sides. "Mom, and Margaret suggested we make it a surprise. Isn't that brilliant? We'll tell you we're having a quiet family dinner and then surprise. All your friends and family will be there to celebrate." "A surprise engagement party?" Avery repeated numbly. "Yes. Oh, Avery, I'm so excited I can barely contain myself. This is going to be perfect." Avery looked at Lucas, who had clearly heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. His expression was a mixture of panic and something that might have been hysterical laughter. "Mom, I really don't think—" "No arguments, sweetheart. This is happening. I've waited 29 years to plan my daughter's engagement party, and I'm not taking no for an answer." The line went dead, leaving Avery staring at her phone in horror. "So," Lucas said after a moment, "engagement party this weekend." "Surprise engagement party," Avery corrected, "with both families and all our relatives." "Right. Surprise engagement party." They looked at each other for a long moment, and then inexplicably they both started laughing. Not polite, controlled laughter, but the kind of helpless, borderline hysterical laughter that happens when the universe has officially lost its mind. "This is insane." Avery gasped between fits of laughter. "Completely insane," Lucas agreed, wiping tears from his eyes. "We're trapped in a romantic comedy that spiraled completely out of control. I think we passed spiraled out of control about a week ago." Avery's laughter gradually subsided, replaced by a growing sense of inevitability. "Lucas, what are we going to do?" "I don't know, but I know what I want to do." "What's that?" "I want to stop running from this. I want to stop making it complicated when it's actually very simple." "Simple?" Avery laughed again, though this time it was softer. "Nothing about this is simple." "Yes, it is." Lucas stood up and pulled her to her feet, his hands on her shoulders. "Avery, I love you. You love me. Everything else is just details." "Details?" She raised an eyebrow. "Lucas, we've built our entire relationship on lies. Have we? Or have we built it on the truth we were too scared to admit?" Avery stared at him, her heart racing. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that every story we told about how we met, how we fell in love, how we knew we wanted to spend our lives together, maybe those weren't lies. Maybe they were just things that hadn't happened yet. That's—" Avery searched for the word. "That's crazy. Maybe. Or maybe it's the sanest thing either of us has ever considered." Lucas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Avery's eyes widened. "Lucas, what are you doing?" "Something I should have done 2 weeks ago if I'd been brave enough to admit how I felt." He dropped to one knee right there in her office, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, completely different from his grandmother's ring, but somehow perfect for her. "Avery Elizabeth Quinn," he said, his voice steady and sure. "Will you marry me for real this time?" Avery stared down at him, her mind reeling. This was crazy. This was impulsive and reckless, and everything she'd spent her entire life avoiding. They'd known each other for exactly 16 days. They'd started their relationship with a lie. They were in the middle of a complex business arrangement that could explode spectacularly if anyone discovered the truth. It was also the most romantic moment of her entire life. "Lucas, I know it's crazy. I know we're doing everything backward and upside down, but Avery, I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am about how I feel about you. What about our contract? What about the rules?" "Forget the contract. Forget the rules. The only rule that matters is this. Do you love me?" Avery looked down at him, at this incredible man who had somehow turned her carefully ordered world completely upside down in the best possible way. She thought about the past 2 weeks, about how effortless everything had felt when they stopped overthinking it, about how he made her laugh and challenged her and made her want to be braver than she'd ever been before. "Yes," she whispered, "I love you. Then marry me. Not because of your job or my family or any of the reasons we started this thing. Marry me because you can't imagine your life without me in it." Avery felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at this man she'd somehow fallen completely in love with. "You realize this is completely insane?" "Completely. We're going to have to tell everyone the truth about how this started, eventually. Your mother is going to kill us. Probably. My parents are going to think I've lost my mind. Most likely, we could lose everything. Or we could gain everything." Avery looked at the ring, then back at Lucas's face at the hope and love and terrifying certainty she saw there. "Ask me again," she said. Lucas smiled that brilliant, heart-stopping smile that had made her fall in love with him in the first place. "Avery Quinn, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you. You crazy, wonderful man." Lucas stood up and slipped the new ring onto her finger beside his grandmother's ring, then kissed her with a passion that made her forget. They were in her office in the middle of the day with the door unlocked and her entire career hanging in the balance. When they finally broke apart, Avery rested her forehead against his and smiled. "So, what happens now?" "Now," Lucas said, "we figure out how to tell both our families that our fake engagement was actually real all along, without admitting that it started fake in the first place. That's going to require some creative storytelling. Good thing we've had practice. And the engagement party? The engagement part is going to be perfect, because this time we won't be acting." Avery kissed him again, shorter this time, but no less meaningful. "I love you, Lucas Crestwood." "I love you too, future Mrs. Crestwood." As they stood there in her office holding each other and planning their impossible future, Avery realized that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. She'd set out to save her career with an elaborate lie, and somehow she'd found the love of her life instead. It was completely insane. It was also completely perfect. Outside her office, she could hear the busy sounds of her colleagues, working phones, ringing, the normal rhythm of a successful business day. Tomorrow she would give the presentation that would secure her future with the company. This weekend, she would attend her own surprise engagement party and somehow convince two families that her whirlwind romance was exactly what it appeared to be. But right now, in this moment, with Lucas's arms around her and two engagement rings sparkling on her finger, Avery had never been happier to throw caution to the wind and embrace the beautiful chaos of falling in love. The truth had set them free. After all, even if it was going to make the next few